Hey everyone, this is Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology, and today we are going to continue our conversation on Pluto's upcoming entrance into the sign of Aquarius. We are going to do that by taking a look at one of my favorite passages. This comes from the Astrology of Fate by Liz Greene, and it is a passage on the sign of Aquarius. So this will be allowing us to get more deeply into the sign and its mythology as a way of unpacking what this transit might mean for all of us individually, and also kind of reflecting on what it might mean that we're entering into a new era historically. We talked a little bit yesterday about the history of the age of Aquarius and what that means and stuff like that. If you haven't checked that out, you might go back and take a look. The Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in 2020 opened up a new era of Jupiter-Saturn conjunctions in air signs. And so the fact that Pluto is moving into Aquarius and hitting that conjunction point of the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction point does seem to signal that there's a trend toward an airy age. What might that mean? I'll reflect on that a little bit as I go along today, too. I'll be trying to offer some feedback and reflections alongside of Liz Greene's wonderful text, which, you know, it's like her text alone is enough. But I do have some thoughts that kind of to riff off from what she said that I hope you'll find useful. Of course, the entrance is on the 23rd. So that's this week, that is Thursday of this week. We have the entrance. And so this week is sort of like Pluto and Aquarius week. Anyway, before we get into it, as always, don't forget to like and subscribe, share your comments. You can find a transcript of today's talk on the website, nightlightastrology.com. If you have a story to share this week, please do. We're trying to aggregate stories about Saturn and Pluto's ingresses. Use the hashtag grabbed and then put Saturn in Pisces or Pluto in Aquarius and tell us what you've noticed, especially by view of the whole sign house that it's entered, or by way of the whole sign house that's entered in your birth chart. That would be really interesting. By the way, we are having a flash sale this week. If you go over to my website, which is nightlightastrology.com, and you go to the courses page, we have rebooted the Kickstarter sale for 1 week only on the courses. So people email us and say, hey, I missed the sale. I really wanted to take advantage of the great rates you had during the Kickstarter. And if we get enough people that ask that, like we did last year, we ran a 1 week sale last year, kind of rebooting those discounts. We're doing that again this year. So if you click on any of the courses, first year course starts in June. I'll be promoting it starting in April. First year course starts in June. If you go down to the bottom of the page, you'll find that where the early bird rate is, it's crossed out and there's a sale price listed there. That'll be there for 1 week. So you have until March 27th at midnight to take advantage of this. And when you do, you'll save, get up to 50% off the normal full class rate, which is, $400 cheaper than even our early bird payment. So a really good deal. You can find discounted rates on any and all of the programs. If you click on the courses page, go to literally any of them, you'll see a sales price listed at the bottom. You can get in on the first year program in June or November of this year or next year, whenever you want. You can use that as a credit. And then same thing for the second year course, which begins every June. Horary begins every June, only once yearly for second year in Horary. Readings and Passages, Masterclass, and Roots and Spheres all start in January, but it'd be a good time to save getting in on next year's programs if you want to do that, especially if you're already enjoying Roots and Spheres and you want to join us again next year. It's a great way to save. Okay, so if you have any questions about our sale prices or the classes themselves, email us, info@nightlightastrology.com. We also have 2 and 4 class passes available just for this week. It saves even more. And if you want the link to those, it's in the comment section or the description of this video. So great way if you want to bundle some of them together and save even more. All right, let's get into this. I want to read you what Liz Greene, one of the great modern masters, has to say about the sign of Aquarius. And I'm going to pause at certain points and reflect on what it might mean that Pluto is entering Aquarius, given what she's saying. Aquarius, for mercy has a human heart, pity a human face, and love the human form divine, and peace the human dress. That's from William Blake, Songs of Innocence. We arrive now at the sign of the New Age, which in the 1960s was proclaimed to be the age of love and brotherhood, but which it is increasingly apparent may be a little bit more complex than that. Aquarius is a complex sign with 2 planetary rulers, Saturn and Uranus, but its rulers, unlike those of Scorpio, have little in common. In fact, They are enemies in Greek myth, as we have seen, and the struggle between them seems to portray an inherent duality or ambiguity within Aquarius itself. Even though I don't agree with Liz Greene's use, or modern astrology's use, of outer planets as sign rulers, the way she handles the joint pairing of Uranus and Saturn in Aquarius, given that modern designation, to me is just brilliant. So I take away a lot from it, even though I don't assign outer planets to sign rulers myself. But here's what she says. We have seen quite a lot of Kronos Saturn already, and there is little mythic material on the sky god Uranus to save the fate he suffers at the hands of his son. In fact, the only salient piece of information we have about the ancient and elusive deity is that he was repelled by the children he begat on his mother, wife, sister, Gaia, the earthy titans and the grotesque hundred-handed giants, and imprisoned the whole brood in Tartaros, the bowels of the underworld, so that they would not offend his aesthetic eye. This tells us a good deal about Aquarius, in fact, more than the paucity of material might suggest. I have seen this process of repression of the earthy and the bestial so often in Aquarians that it seems a fundamental necessity of the sign. The offensiveness that the crude and the chthonic hold for Aquarius accounts perhaps for its ceaseless efforts to reform and redeem mankind, and its almost ferocious civilizing instinct, which is forever worrying at the baser aspects of the human personality, like a dog at a bone. Like Uranus, the heavenly daimon of perfectionism suffers eventually at the hands of that which it has cast out, but is redeemed in other more ambiguous forms. The severed genitals, which Kronos throws into the sea, breed the goddess Aphrodite, who combines in herself both the sensuality of the earthborn Titans and the aestheticism of the sky god, who is her father. The Erinyes, as we have seen, are also his progeny, born of his suffering and his blood, and are a kind of permanent law against the shedding of the blood of kin. First of all, wow, she packs it in. But one of the things that I think is really important to understand is that in Aquarius, and I mentioned this in a previous video when I talked about the shadows of the Age of Enlightenment, that where there is an idealism about what humanity can become, what humanity is capable of, is usually a very severe judgment of that which is messy, or that which is sort of natural and earthy and sensual and embodied. And it's sort of like there's a compliment that sometimes people give to me on YouTube that I read it and I'm always like, were you not aware that that's kind of an insult? You know, the people think that they're giving a compliment, and it'll go something like this. I was so impressed by today's video. You took it to a totally new place that you're usually not capable of. It's like, well, thanks. So I guess you're saying that my material is sort of shitty, but then sometimes it hits these high notes and you go, look at what you're capable of, you know? And I'm teasing, of course, because, you know, I try to take such things as compliments, even though I don't particularly love that kind of statement. But it's that idea that, like, as soon as you point out the potential, and remember, one of the synonyms for New Age is the human potential movement, and it's also often conflated with the Age of Aquarius. What are we capable of? What more could we become? Well, in that is an inherent judgment of what we are, of what is natural, of the way things are. And you can't help that. I'm not saying that it's like, how could you? It's just part of the archetype. You can't talk about progress and think about how much better we could become without inherently thinking that we're not good enough the way that we are. But that's a real shadow that Aquarius, an airy age that we're entering into, could fall victim to. We could become more condemning of our earthly life and condition while we reach for civilizations on Mars or whatever. The offensiveness that crude and the chthonic hold for Aquarius accounts perhaps for its ceaseless efforts to reform and redeem mankind, and its almost ferocious civilizing instinct, which is forever worrying at the baser aspects of the human personality, like a dog at a bone. It's like, damn, she gets it. She just nails it, and that's it. But we must look further afield than Uranus if we are to grasp the mythic pattern of Aquarius. My feeling is that an equally important figure who embodies much of the meaning of the sign is the beneficent Titan Prometheus, who comes of the same race as Kronos, yet who sides with Zeus in his battle against his father, and who ultimately takes the side of man against the gods. Prometheus is the great cosmic social worker, whose theft of fire from Zeus to give to man embodies a spirit which is not content with merely instinctual life, but must forever grow better and more enlightened. There is some disagreement about Prometheus's birth in stories. All agree that he was a Titan, but he is sometimes Hera's illegitimate child, and sometimes the son of Iapetus, the Titan. I'm probably slaughtering a lot of these Greek words. His name means the one who foresees, or the provident. He had a brother, Epimetheus, whose name means he who learns only from the event, or the heedless. Together, these two titans seem to describe opposite qualities of the human spirit. Because Prometheus was gifted with foresight, he knew the outcome of the rebellion of Zeus against his father Kronos. And although he was himself a Titan, he wisely preferred to fight on Zeus's side. He assisted at the birth of the goddess Athene from Zeus's head, and she in turn taught him architecture, astronomy, mathematics, navigation, medicine, metallurgy, and other useful arts. These in turn he passed on to man. In fact, the oldest version of Prometheus myth tells that it was the Titan himself who made men with the consent of Athene out of clay and water in the likeness of gods, and Athene breathed life into them. This is similar to the Talmudic account of creation, where the archangel Michael, Prometheus's counterpart, formed Adam from dust at the command of Yahweh. The arts which Prometheus taught man mark him as the daimon of the cultural impulse. He is an image of that instinct which strives to raise man beyond his animal origins, to become godlike. There is a long passage in Aeschylus Prometheus Bound, I think that's how I say it, which expresses eloquently the gifts which the Titan, against the wishes of Zeus, has bestowed on man. Of wretched humans he, Zeus, took no account, resolved to annihilate them and create another race. This purpose there was no one to oppose, but I dared. I saved the human race from being ground to dust, from total death. Prometheus goes on to speak of how men could not understand nor see things properly, nor comprehend the world around them, how they could not build houses, possessing no carpentry, how they could not make sense of the orderly cycle of the changing seasons and the growing of crops. He tells of how he introduced them to astronomy and mathematics, the training and care of animals, and shipbuilding. He also taught them medicine and healing and prophecy, and the reading of omens and the working of gold, silver, and iron. So here's the whole truth in one word. All human skill in science was Prometheus's gift. This benign impulse of goodwill toward mankind I feel to be one of the dominant themes in Aquarius, and it certainly is the one which most descriptions of the sign portray. But the myth of Prometheus is not so simple, for there is another character in the story who also belongs to Aquarius, with whom the Titan is involved in kinship and enmity, Zeus, king of the gods. Zeus wanted to destroy man and spared him only at the Titan's plea. And Zeus in our tradition is Jupiter, right, in the astrological tradition. And he grew gradually angrier and angrier at the increasing powers and talents which Prometheus's human proteges began to display. This is the jealous god of Genesis, who does not wish his creation to partake of the fruit of the tree of knowledge and life, lest man become as God. Zeus here is more like his own father Kronos, and seems to embody that aspect of the psyche which does not wish to become conscious, but attempts to thwart and hold back the development of the individual ego, threatening dire punishments and instilling a sense of sin in the renegade. Prometheus is incessantly at odds with Zeus over the issue of how much or how little mankind should be permitted in its development. It is as though these two deities represent some profound truth about the nature of ourselves. I feel that Aquarius, whose powerful impulse toward the development of the civilized and conscious aspects of man is well known, has likewise an equally powerful antithetical aspect within him, which forms the drama of his own mythic pattern. I'm going to read more in a second, but what I love that she is doing, which is really, in my mind, attributable in the traditional sense to the Saturn rulership of Aquarius, because I feel that the complex mythology of Kronos Saturn embodies a lot of what she's saying without having to necessarily bring in Uranus and Prometheus, although the juxtaposition between Saturn and Uranus in the modern sense is super, super interesting. And I think she's using it to hit on things that are core qualities of Aquarius. I would just, in my explanation of those qualities, would come more from a focus on Saturn. But that's also because I'm not interested in like the again, like the outer sign as planet thing, or as ruler thing. Outer planet is sign ruler. But one of the things that I really appreciate about what she's doing is saying that you can understand that there is this impulse in Aquarius, and she's attributing this to Uranus. The impulse is to the redemption of humanity, or the advancement of humanity as a collective, like for the social good of all, for the advancement of human knowledge above baser, lesser, or more ignorant conditions that reflect the dimness of like early evolved life on planet Earth or something like that. This is an archetype. This is important. Once you hear this, you start thinking, is that true or is that not true? It's not true or false. It's archetypal. That's an important distinction that I feel like we have to make again and again when learning about the myths of astrology. It's like astrology helps you to understand that all of the different philosophies that we think we're always trying to choose between are all part of these archetypal mandalas. They're not really, they don't need to compete with one another. But anyway, more on that another time. Prometheus evidenced his contempt for Zeus's tyranny in numerous ways. According to the tale, one day the Titan was invited to act as an arbiter in a dispute about which portions of a sacrificial bull should be offered to the gods and which given to men to eat. He flayed and jointed the animal and sewed its hide to form two open-mouthed bags. Into one he put the delicious flesh, concealed beneath the untempting stomach. Into the other he put the bare bones covered with a rich layer of fat. Then he offered Zeus the choice. The god, easily deceived, chose the bag with the bones and fat, and in fury at the deception, punished Prometheus by denying man the gift of fire. Let them eat their raw flesh, he cried. Prometheus then went to Athene, his patroness, who let him into Olympus by the back stairs. He lit a torch at the fiery chariot of the sun and broke from it a fragment of glowing charcoal. This he thrust into the pithy hollow of a giant fennel stalk. Then, extinguishing his torch, he stole away and delivered the sacred flame to man. Zeus swore revenge. He ordered Hephaestos, the divine smith, to make a clay woman. The four winds breathed life into her, and all the Olympian goddesses adorned her. This woman, called Pandora, Zeus sent as a gift to Epimetheus, Prometheus's brother. But Epimetheus had been warned by his four-sided sibling to accept no gifts from Zeus, so he refused the woman. Zeus then had Prometheus chained naked to a pillar high in the Caucasian mountains where a greedy vulture or eagle, Caucasian? I think it's Caucasian. Caucasian mountains where a greedy vulture or eagle tore at his liver all day, year in and year out. Every night the liver grew whole again. Epimetheus, alarmed by his brother's fate, married Pandora. She opened a jar which Prometheus had warned him to keep closed, and in which he had been at pains to imprison all the spites that might plague mankind. Old age, labor, sickness, insanity, vice, and passion. These flew out in a cloud and attacked the race of mortals. Delusive hope, however, which Prometheus had also shut in the jar, discouraged men by her lies from a general suicide. The suffering of Prometheus intended by Zeus to be eternal was, however, finite, for the hero Heracles pleaded for his release, and it was granted. We have already seen how the centaur Chiron offered to exchange mortality with the Titans so that Hades should not be cheated of a soul. Having once condemned Prometheus to everlasting punishment, Zeus stipulated that in order to appear still a prisoner, the Titan must wear a ring made from his chains and set with the Caucasian stone. Mankind now began to wear rings and wreaths in honor of their benefactor, and Zeus set the arrow which Heracles used to shoot the vulture which tormented the Titan in the stars as the constellation Sagittarius. Prometheus is the redeemer of mankind from darkness. As he himself says in Aeschylus' tragedy, all art and sciences which the human race has developed stem from him. This beneficent aspect of the mythic figure is recognizable enough in the Aquarian concern for human welfare and development, but the problem of Zeus is less simple, and likewise the image of his torment. Here is the paradoxical problem of the urge toward consciousness colliding with an urge toward unconsciousness. Prometheus is not man in the sense of the ego. He is the daimon who seeks to help man develop. This perpetual tension on an archetypal level creates inevitable suffering because the collision is inevitable. We can look upon Prometheus as a hero because he has offered man the divine creative fire, but from the point of view of the gods' world, he has committed a crime, a sin. And this situation is one which Jung was particularly concerned with, the sense of sin which arises when any effort is made at individual realization. That is super interesting. First of all, what I love about that is that the idea of progress, that in order to make progress, like you have to break things, or that there's always a sense of potential transgression in order to make. I mean, how many times do I see people coming in during Uranus transits, for example, when there is the need to make progress, but they'll have to break certain structures or traditions or rules in order to do so, and someone is going to be upset or even hurt. But nonetheless, you have to evolve in order to do so. So there's like this sense that evolution and transgression of boundaries and limits and laws and rules somehow go together. That's fascinating. And this could be one of the more challenging aspects of Pluto into Aquarius, that in order for us to evolve and become the next thing, there's, if you're going to make an omelet, you got to break some eggs kind of thing going on. And that it's structures have to change very radically and in ways that are sometimes painful in order for progress to occur, and that it doesn't go unpunished, that there is this kind of backlash from the fates for trying to progress. And that's the shadow and fear that we face whenever progress is close at hand. She goes on to say, Jung had Aquarius on the ascendant, and therefore his preoccupation with this problem must have had something to do with him, as well as something he observed in his patients. By opening up the Pandora's box of the unconscious, he was, paradoxically, playing both the role of Prometheus and that of Zeus. His constant doubt in the validity of his own work is, I think, some indication of what that vulture or eagle attacking the liver might mean. For the liver, in ancient astrological, physiological correlation, is the organ of Zeus Jupiter. And therefore, Zeus's vulture destroys that part of the mortal body, which is also the god himself. We are back yet again to that peculiar doubling of symbols, which we have already met several times. The god punishes Prometheus through the very aspect of the Titan which reflects the god. Perhaps this might be described as his faith or his belief in himself. I have found that side by side with the genuine altruism of Aquarius, there also lies a profound self-doubt. And I have rarely seen people quite so adept at self-punishment and self-denigration as those Aquarians who have managed to express something of the Promethean spirit and have contributed something, however small, to individual or collective evolution. In traditional astrology, the sun is in detriment in the sign of Aquarius, and this is said to indicate that the principle of self-expression and self-confidence is hampered by Aquarius's perpetual concern with the power and viewpoint of the group. Aquarius is often tormented with the horror of being selfish and is the most riddled of all the signs with shoulds and oughts. The myth suggests a deeper ground for this fear of self-fulfillment. It implies the problem of the sense of sin which accompanies any real effort at development. Now, that's fascinating. Another thing we talked about with regard to Aquarius in terms of the psychology of Aquarius was the way in which concern over the group can hamper development of the individual. And too much preoccupation with individuality can take us away from development and evolution vis-a-vis groups. And that there's a tension there in the sign of Aquarius. Genesis represents the act of becoming conscious as a taboo infringement, as though knowledge meant that a sacrosanct barrier had been impiously overstepped. And this is the thing, is that many of the most enlightened scientists were told by the religious establishment that their desire to know and get to the truth of the universe was hubris, that they were overstepping. So you see how that idea of progress constellates someone saying, you can't go far. That's arrogant. And you should be punished for trying to overstep. You should just be an animal, just stay where you are. Or there's people where if you want to progress, they'll say, oh, you want to progress? Well, what do you think is wrong with the way things are right now? You're judging it. You're condemning it, which is the opposite problem that we talked about earlier, where Aquarius might show up and say, oh, we need to progress. But in the meantime, I'm obsessed with progress because I tend to judge and keep everything at arm's length, and I'm sort of dissociated from earthly life. So it can go either way. I think that Genesis is right insofar as every step toward a greater consciousness is a kind of Promethean guilt. Through knowledge, the gods are, as it were, robbed of their fire. That is, something that was the property of the unconscious powers is torn out of its natural context and subordinated to the whims of the conscious mind. The man who has usurped the new knowledge suffers, however, a transformation of or enlargement of consciousness which no longer resembles that of his fellow man. He has raised himself above the human level of his age. He shall become like unto God. But in so doing, has alienated himself from humanity. The pain of this loneliness is the vengeance of the gods, for never again can he return to mankind. He is, as the myth says, chained to the lonely cliffs of the here we go again, the Caucasians, the Caucasus, forsaken of God and man. I would not put this better than Jung has. That was a quote from Jung. And no doubt he knew all too well the pain of this loneliness because he stole a considerable amount of fire. Needless to say, isolation from fellows is a profoundly painful dilemma for the socially minded Aquarian. We are Jung's beneficiaries, but no doubt the man himself had, despite the remission of punishment which occurs in the myth, to continue to wear the ring forged from his chain, the reminder of the offense against the gods. All the traditional Aquarian fields of endeavor, science, invention, social welfare, psychology, even astrology, are tainted with this loneliness, which is the price of offending Zeus. Isn't that just remarkable? And it's so true. When it comes to the Aquarian archetype, the progress you make will alienate you from other people. Specifically because you can't, like, I'll just give you an example. When I'm around certain people in different social hemispheres that I occupy, and they start talking to me, and somehow it comes up that I spent a decade doing ayahuasca, and I spent a decade doing yoga, and that I'm an astrologer, and all of these things that are like completely alien and foreign to them. There will often be this immediate way where I'm just talking about my life or whatever because it's come up naturally. And they'll look at me like, oh, you think you're better than me? Like, just because I'm into astrology and I've guzzled some psychedelics in the Amazon. But it's not just that. It's because my consciousness is different. I've seen and done things that like a considerable amount of people have no idea about, like you guys do, because you're into astrology. So you know exactly what I'm talking about. How alienating it can be to be amongst people who have not had any kinds of awakening or spiritual experiences. And I don't mean to say this as a way of like, oh, we're so much better than people or whatever. The point is that it's alienating, not that it makes you better than people, just having different experiences and being exposed to different things. There's a social feeling of having transgressed norms that leaves you feeling punished socially, like you're ostracized or alienated, or people don't like you, or they feel uncomfortable around you. And that's a cross that you bear. That's literally the Aquarian cross that you bear when you go digging around, when you steal some fire somewhere, whether it's through psychedelics or Kundalini awakening, or like whatever people do, Kundalini yoga, or do you know what I'm saying? So I hope that comes across well enough. It forms the secret shadow impetus behind the one who must help others, for it is through these helping relationships that some little portion of the intense loneliness of insight is alleviated. The Aquarian impulse is like, well, this has alienated me and made me totally different from others. And then often the next thought is, well, I guess I should go help people. It's like, and Plato warns about this when he says that there's a person who like exits the cave. The prisoner who exits the cave thinks, well, I should go back in and help people because, I'm all alone out here, and, people could probably use help and they'd be very liberated to see what I'm seeing. If you go back in, they could kill you. So Plato's like going over that in his Republic. It is well to remember that Lucifer, the rebellious angel who opposed the wishes of God, means light bearer in Latin, and that in Aquarius we have met another form of the dialogue between rebellious son and jealous father. In Capricorn, this dialogue occurs between the father who has crystallized into old rigid forms and the son who rebels against these worldly restrictions to the detriment of his own productivity. In Aquarius, we are confronting that jealous god whose creation has illicitly spied out the secrets of his origin. That's fascinating. It is probably relevant that in one version of the Prometheus myth, Zeus remits the punishment not out of compassion or favor to Heracles, but because Prometheus, the foresighted, knows the future fate that awaits the king of the gods. Zeus, reluctant to have this information withheld from him, allows himself to be blackmailed. Once again, we encounter that mysterious left-handed handshake, which is the secret collusion between conscious and unconscious. Zeus, although he could have blasted Prometheus into atoms for his sin, permitted him to continue to exist and even to go free because the Titan had something the king of the gods himself needed. Remember when I did that talk a while back on Ganymede and the water pourer. And I talked about how the gods need something from humans as much as humans need something from the gods. Same thing that Greene is saying. He required knowledge of the future from Prometheus and guidance in how to meet it. This is the old alchemical heresy once again, that God needs man to achieve the work of perfection. Isn't that fascinating that the universe, let's call it the universe, somehow needs us in our basic form to live out and perfect things? I think that's fascinating because it suggests that exactly who we are and exactly the way we are is needed somehow by the higher powers. It is also one of the major themes which runs through Jung's work and which infuses it with such a deeply mystical feeling. The struggle towards individuation is not just a cure for neurotic discomfort, but a sacred work done both for man and God. Ego and unconscious thus possess a strangely ambivalent relationship. They are enemies, yet they are dependent upon one another. Zeus and Prometheus sprang from the same seed, Oronus the sky god, who is the image of the eternal heavens. But they have different stock. Zeus is an Olympian and therefore airy, while Prometheus is a Titan and therefore earthy. One is allied to spirit, the other to the world. Their delicately balanced relationship is full of dangers, yet it is a partnership of equals in value, if not in nature. So again, we have the idea of a partnering between heaven and earth. And this is where I think it's very important to talk about the potential shadow of Pluto and Aquarius, which is all air, no earth. Or, I mean, Pluto and Aquarius is in many ways going to bring the reforming, saving, evolving, progressing archetype to humanity. But it can't do so if it doesn't ironically recognize the love and need that it has for humanity just as it is. That acceptance of who we are as we are is vital for progress to actually occur. And that also, we have to be open to the fact that it's not damnation to say that we could be better. It's not condemnation to say we could improve. So we have to meet each other halfway. The gods lift us up as we bring the gods down. And so there's a marriage of above and below. That's the Hermetic axiom that all of astrology is built on. We may now consider the actual constellation of Aquarius and those myths which are connected with it. The water bearer in Egyptian lore was the god who presided over the river Nile. He was called Hapi and was portrayed as a vigorous fat man with woman's breasts, dressed as a boatman or fisherman who resided near the first cataract in a cavern where he poured water to heaven and earth from his urns. Because the whole of Egyptian civilization depended on the yearly flooding of the Nile, Hapi was an important deity, but he did not do anything else besides pour his water. The Greeks put an altogether different myth upon the constellation, that of Ganymedes, the beautiful son of King Tros of Troy. According to the story, he was the loveliest youth alive, and Zeus desired him and chose him to be cupbearer to the gods. The Olympian disguised himself as an eagle and abducted the boy to heaven. Afterwards, on Zeus's behalf, Hermes presented King Tros with a golden vine and 2 fine horses in compensation. Ganymede was made immortal and dispensed nectar to the gods, while Zeus set his image among the stars as the water-bearer. What relevance this pretty little myth might have to the complex psychology and fate of Aquarius is not immediately apparent. Robert Graves has the following comments to make about it. The Zeus-Ganymedes myth gained immense popularity in Greece and Rome because it afforded religious justification for grown men's passionate love of a boy. That's interesting. With the spread of Platonic philosophy, the hitherto intellectually dominant Greek woman degenerated into an unpaid worker and breeder of children wherever Zeus and Apollo were the ruling gods. And that's Robert Graves' comment. Now, I am inclined, since not all Aquarians are homosexual, to take symbolically rather than literally this charming story of gay Greek gods. Graves connects the myth with a repudiation of the feminine and a reduction in its power. This is certainly a relevant theme for Aquarius. There is a noticeable horror of the base and the biological inherent in the sign. We have seen this already in the story of Uranus rejecting his Titan children, and there is likewise a deep fear of the irrational. The image of homosexuality in myth might, among other things, suggest an exclusively masculine world, a place where women in the instinctual plane of life cannot enter, a union which produces no offspring other than those of the mind and spirit. So she's making this as a metaphor, just to be clear on that. This applies no less to the Aquarian woman than to the Aquarian man, for she is often more at home with masculine company and masculine ideals. The tribal custom of taking pubescent boys away from their mothers and setting them up in exclusively masculine clubs or groups in order to counteract the power of the feminine matriarchal realm is an anthropological parallel which suggests how archetypal is the quest for male strength in the exclusion of the feminine. Zeus and Ganymedes together reject Hera, the mistress. When the king of the gods takes the female paramour, Hera can at least compete. With Ganymedes, she cannot even get near it. I feel this is an Aquarian pattern, although it generally occurs in spheres other than the sexual one. This sign is most definitely the champion of light and spirit, and the only feminine deity with whom Prometheus himself had any dealings at all was Athene, herself hardly a friend of the Great Mother, as she is a father's virgin daughter. Thus, the Promethean world is a masculine world in which the drama of the struggle for evolution and its inevitable repercussions are imaged. It's an important final note, whether you like the way she went with that or not. It's an important final note, though, that there is something about Aquarius and its idealism and perfectionism and hope for humanity that is in many ways very young and archetypally masculine insofar as it presents ideal images of ascent from the biological to the angelic, so to speak. So this sign doesn't have like the greatest love necessarily for the feminine realm of nature. And the progress and enlightenment, again, can come sometimes at the cost of the feminine. And yet it can be projected ideologically, projected the Aquarian spirit as feminine insofar as it's for the love of humankind, right? But the feminine in ancient astrological terms is not just about love and agape and utopia and perfection. The feminine is the relational, natural biomatrix that is in part like it's magical, but it's also like chaotic, and it has a dark side to it, and it's much more about immanence as opposed to transcendence. Not that there isn't a sort of transcendent quality associated with the feminine ancient astrology, but it's just that this, like, you can see people saying like that where we're heading to is a more like feminine future insofar as that is somehow described or depicted as this like very loving, perfect, harmonized place. And that will be projected as like feminine. But the degree of intolerance toward diversity and messiness and difference and like sort of biological, organic, feminine life, the tolerance may be very low, which is a weird thing that I think we have to be a little bit careful of. Anyway, so well, it's a big stuff to be talking about, and I hope that you find all of this thought-provoking and stimulating. I would love to hear your thoughts and reflections as you're taking this in. And we'll continue on with our exploration of Pluto into Aquarius with more tomorrow. So that's it for now, and we'll see you again soon. Take it easy, everyone. Bye.